Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews starting the week off. It is Monday, it is Mark Silvestri Day, and I will tell you right away, we are almost done with Mark Silvestri. We got only 2 more reviews left. So CyberForce, the regular series, issue 2, cover dated January, let me double check, 1994. And next week we'll be looking at more recent Mark Silvestri that he a few years ago did a Batman miniseries. We'll be looking at that first issue because it's all I have, and that'll be it for Mark Silvestri. Thinking back to when I was a kid, this is in around the same time as when I stopped collecting CyberForce back then. So even now, having lost some of those issues, those old Image comics that I had, and found them again, you know, certain runs and certain issues that I really liked and wanted, that I had as a kid and others that I didn't. CyberForce is not one that I followed through on or got any further because, you know, I don't really see a reason to, and I'll explain throughout the review why. And I still will kind of stick by that now. As an adult, I still kind of have the same reasons to not continue collecting this. And let's get into it right away. The actual cover, nothing to say, looks pretty cool. Still got some of that cool Mark Silvestri dynamism left here, right? Kind of that look and feel of anatomy and composition that reminds me a little bit of Greg Capullo that I mentioned before. And now we're looking at Warblade here, and all of a sudden I feel like this is a lot of Jim Lee, right? And that's kind of what I'm seeing there. So I'm a little bit disappointed in seeing Mark Silvestri, I've talked about this before, slowly start to morph kind of into a Jim Lee clone to a certain extent. And this is definitely an issue where it becomes apparent. And I think as a kid, not just art-wise, but also storyline-wise, I was really getting tired of this. And there's a reason for that too. I'll explain as we look at the credits inside as to why that is. And, you know, the most Mark Silvestri art on here is in the background here, I guess because it's less detailed. But even then, I can tell the line again is more of a Jim Lee line. And that reason is, you know, over the last few issues, even in the miniseries, Scott Williams has been inking Mark Silvestri. And that certainly hasn't helped in his art, like I said, morphing into, to me, somewhat of a Jim Lee clone. It's starting to take away what's specific to Silvestri that I like. So that is why, like I said, this will be the last issue of CyberForce I review. And as a kid, this is the last issue of CyberForce I bought in my collection. Enough about the cover. Let's move on inside and look at more reasons why I don't really like this issue. And this is not going to be a super positive review of Cyberforce number 2. So Killer Instinct crossover, first of all. So it's a crossover. You do have to buy Wildcats. I did not buy Wildcats, you know. So Cyberforce 1, I guess, is not officially part of it. Like it's like a prequel or something. But, you know, you would have to read Cyberforce 1, then Wildcat 6, then this issue, Cyberforce 2, right? And already having to buy those issues from Jim Lee, I can kind of have the same thing with Wildcats and Jim Lee. As far as his art, I felt was kind of going downhill a little bit, and I wasn't really interested in the storyline. So the fact that they kind of joined together was a double assault of stuff that I wasn't interested in. And I kind of quit both series in around the same time. So during this crossover. So Mark Silvestri, creator, also co-plotting and doing pencils. Eric Silvestri, script. Scott Williams is doing the inks. And Joe Scioto, the colors. Once again, Mike Heisler, Chris Eliopoulos are doing letters. So this issue, again, is where I just jump off the Mark Silvestri train. There's some art in this issue that, to me, is very Mark Silvestri. And then there's art that isn't, and that starts to kind of look kind of... again, as I mentioned before, like he starts to look like a Jim Lee clone. The inking by Scott Williams definitely doesn't help. Obviously, that probably makes his art look more like Jim Lee as well. And what I've noticed is, as great as Scott Williams is over Jim Lee, when I see Jim Lee inking himself on his own, I see Mark Silvestri inked by himself as well. Their art is not flat. I feel like Scott Williams, his style, as intricate and as detailed, and the whole West Coast hatching look, and as great as it was in the 90s and stuff, it does flatten the art a little bit. I don't know if that's ever been said before, but there's just something about it that flattens the art. And I see some of that in his own original art when he does, you know, Batman and Wolverine pinups and stuff that, you know, you can see out there by Scott Williams. So that's kind of where I'm going at it from in this issue. So one thing that I think is still pretty Mark Silvestri-ish, if I can put it that way, are the ships up here. Somewhat inspired maybe by Alien, a bit of Geiger, I feel, but they look cool in their dynamic and the angle here, and even down here. I think those are great. The ships look more dynamic than the figures in this comic, so you know there's something wrong there. Out of all these characters, to me, they all look almost pretty much like Jim Lee drew them, except for this character in the back, who I forget is her name, Sincere or Kinship or some stupid 90s name, right? Okay, right away, the double page spread, and, you know, this is exactly what I'm talking about. All of these poses are just that, poses. There's, you know, it's full-on Jim Lee clonage going on here. It's really hard to unfurl this page here, so Ripclaw, unfortunately, due to shitty production values, has about 1/6 of his face covered up. No matter, not that much more to look at on this page here. And story-wise, this just harkens back when Ripclaw and Warblade were on the same team, and I guess working for, are they called Cyberdata? The villains in CyberForce, I think that's what they're called. And, you know, this is what happens too, is like all of, except maybe with the exception of Rob Liefeld, but I do think especially Mark Silvestri and Jim Lee, their art by this point, like I said, it starts to downgrade, right? Like some of this stuff again is Jim Lee clonage more so, and not even as good as Jim Lee, and this page as well. And it's like the guys who are the forebears, who are great artists, Mark Silvestri and Jim Lee, their art starts to look like everyone else's in their studios, and the secondary guys like no offense, but you know, Brandon Peterson and was it Scott Clark, and some of the guys doing the secondary books for Top Cow and for Wildstorm. That's what it's starting to look like. And they're really, like, you can see Mark Silvestri here really cutting back on the detail of these robots here. And maybe these are some of the pages that were done by the ink assistants too, because Scott Williams didn't actually ink the whole issue. He had some ink assists, right? Like, this is fully, you know, I could believe Jim Lee drew this, right? This guy here. There's very little Mark Silvestri left in these pages. You know, once, like, to me, again, the compositions, the kind of posy stuff, you know, the lessened foreshortening, right? Other than when we get these kind of Wolverine shots of characters jumping with claws. Like, look at the level of drawing here on this face. Like, would you ever associate that with Mark Silvestri or even Jim Lee, right? I would say, you know, if I didn't know and you just showed me this drawing, I would never guess Mark Silvestri. I would probably guess maybe Brandon Peterson, maybe some of these, like I said, these second tier kind of Wildstorm and Top Cow artists. Colors are still very dark. A lot of, maybe not on these pages, but generally a lot of orange and blue once again, because Joe Chiodo. So at least that's consistent. And I do feel like that did contribute a lot to the look of Cyberforce. Are the colors by Joe Chiodo? Again, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know, but it is consistent. I'll say that. It's probably the most consistent thing visually within the series. And yeah, there's just not that much to talk about, you know, at least positively. All of this stuff to me, once again, this face here, each panel just looks a little bit amateur, you know? It's not the Mark Silvestri that I knew from, you know, I don't know Mark Silvestri, talking art wise, but his art that I knew from, you know, Wolverine and that first Cyberforce miniseries was 1 to 4. I think the art is pretty damn great. Get a little bit of it here maybe on these pages. Seems like he's having maybe a bit more fun with them. You know, his females are always pretty excellent. You know, she does again though starts to look more like a Jim Lee figure than a Mark Silvestri figure. And again, is that because of Mark Silvestri or is that because of Scott Williams? Do they care at this point? Who knows? You know, a little bit of the old Mark Silvestri here. Once again, that harkens back to Greg Capullo, I think, maybe with the angle choice and the dynamism of the pose. You know, not quite as posy as most Jim Lee stuff. You know, every once in a while there's a pang of, I feel like these ones here are some of the most dynamic kind of poses within the whole comic here. This close-up is pretty cool. So yeah, most of this issue is just Wolverine versus Wolverine, or Warblade versus Ripclaw. Cutting and slicing. But yeah, to me, here's one last little bit of Mark Silvestri left. Because maybe Jim Lee just has a totally different interpretation of that angle when he draws a female, and Mark Silvestri has a particular way of doing it, so that still kind of shines through. But everything else I'm seeing is just, again, like a second-rate Jim Lee clone. To be continued in Wildcats number 7, it says, but no, it will not, and we will not continue on. Jim Lee probably still better because he's still just than Mark Silvestri, because instead of trying to copy someone else, he's still drawing in his own style. Which in and of itself is influenced by Art Adams and Barry Windsor Smith and stuff. But Jim Lee's still doing pretty well here. I think that's still some pretty cool art. But yeah, the story was just horrible. This whole story. So there you go. Last issue of CyberForce I ever owned as a kid. And even as an adult, last one we're going to review here on Big Baby Reviews. So that was CyberForce Regular Series issue number 2, Killer Instinct Part 2, crossover with Wildcats. If you have any thoughts and comments, or you disagree with me, let me know in the comments below about this issue, or if have any tidbits or special information that I don't have, let me know. If you're subscribed and you're still watching the videos, thank you so much for still being there. I really appreciate you guys. If you're watching the videos but you're not subscribed, please like or subscribe below. It really takes only a second for you. Helps the channel out, helps get us out there to other like-minded people who hopefully are into the same kind of content that we are, namely comic books. So everyone who's been watching, thank you so much for your support, and have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby Volume 1, issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at kingcomics.ca, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.
Like! Subscribe!